Hey, micro folks, this is Mr. Hooker. Today we're going to do Elasticity Chapter 6. We're going to break this into two videos, one on price elasticity of demand, the second one on everything else. So let's just go ahead and get on into the action. Here we go. So price elasticity of demand measures the buyer's responsiveness to price changes. There is elastic demand, where buyers are sensitive to the price changes. So if you can have a small change in price, that'll give you a large change in quantity demanded. Inelastic demand, buyers are insensitive to changes in price. You could have a pretty much large change in price and you get a small change in quantity demanded. There we go. So your price elasticity coefficient, E sub D is how we're going to do elasticity of demand, is the percentage change in quantity demanded of product X divided by the percentage change in price of product X. And so we are going to use a midpoint formula. So let's look at that. We're going to use that to ensure consistent results, because if you have 2 points, we want to make sure that whether you're going up or down, some of you may go up, some of you may go down, we want to make sure that you both get the same number in the end. So E sub D equals the change in quantity divided by the sum of quantities divided by 2, divided by the change in price, divided by the sum of prices, divided by 2. In numbers, it looks like this. Q1 minus Q2 divided by Q1 plus Q2 divided by 2, divided by P1 minus P2 divided by P1 plus P2 divided by 2. And I know that looks like a lot, but really that Q1 plus Q2 divided by 2 and the P1 plus P2 divided by 2 are just averages of Q and P. And the key thing is, whatever your 0.1 or 0.2 are, make sure that your Q's and P's associated to those stay constant. That's the big news in all of that. It's really a rather simple formula. It looks long, but it's really not as bad as it sounds. Once again, Q1 minus Q2 divided by Q1 plus Q2 divided by 2 divided by P1 minus P2 divided by P1 plus P2 divided by 2. So remember to use percentages, unit-free measures, compare elasticity. We're trying to compare elasticities across products. We're going to eliminate the minus sign at some point. So at some point in all of this, get rid of the minus sign. We need positive numbers in this, and basically because we're comparing the elasticities, and here is why. E sub D greater than 1 is the demand is elastic, and E sub D less than 1, demand is inelastic. If it's equal to 1, it's unit elastic. In the extreme cases, if it's equal to 0, it's perfectly inelastic. If it's infinity, it is perfectly elastic. That is what we have. Okay? That is why we need to get rid of the negative sign, the minus sign. So, perfectly inelastic demand. We have here a vertical line. If you basically put a horizontal line on top of it, you have a capital I, and that will help you remember that that is a perfectly inelastic demand. And here is a horizontal line for perfectly elastic demand. If you put another horizontal line under it, that whole thing looks like a capital E, and that will help you remember that it's perfectly elastic. Just a quick note, elastic curves are more flat in general. So if you realize that perfectly elastic is a horizontal line, elastic curves are flatter in general. The more elastic they are, the flatter they are. That kind of helps. And inelastic curves are steeper in general. Perfectly inelastic is perfectly vertical. The more inelastic they are, the steeper they are. And then moving to flatter, the less inelastic they are. I'll put this econ movie for Home Alone in the course for you. Total revenue test. Total revenue is price times quantity sold. The total revenue test, elastic demand, price, and total revenue move in opposite directions. Inelastic, price, and total revenue move in the same direction. And unit elastic, total revenue doesn't change. So a colleague taught me something with this. If you imagine putting a rubber band on your two thumbs and having them kind of close together, and then you say, okay, I'm going to move them. And if you move them in the same direction, they don't really you don't really stretch them. So there is no elasticity there. They are inelastic. If, however, you move them in opposite directions, there is stretching. It is elastic. So price and total revenue, if you think of one thumb as price and one thumb of total revenue, if they move in the same direction, there's no elasticity, that it is inelastic. If you move them in opposite directions and it stretches, it is elastic. So that is how that goes. Oops, my bad. So excuse me. Total revenue test with elastic demand. You lower the price on an elastic demand. The blue gain exceeds the total loss, the yellow loss. So yellow, you only lose a little bit, gain a lot with blue. So if you have a elastic product, lower your price by just a little bit, you will gain revenue. If you lower the price with inelastic demand, that is not a good idea. You should raise your price with inelastic demand. Yellow loss exceeds your blue gain. So you lose a lot with yellow, gain very little with blue, and boom, you lose. And if you have unit elastic, you lose just as much with yellow as you gain with blue. If you have a unit elastic good, your goal is to make people believe that you have a elastic or a inelastic good, probably more inelastic than elastic. You want people to believe that you have the G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip, is the goal there. So here is an example. Please take note of the graph there on the bottom left. It's a linear demand curve, and it is going to be important when we get to Module 3, but all linear demand curves are just like this. They all have these same three sections. They are all elastic at the top, unit elastic in the middle, inelastic at the bottom. They are all unit elastic about at the 45-degree point from the origin. Elastic at the top, inelastic at the bottom. So you will notice there on the bottom right, total revenue rises until you hit that unit elastic point, maxes out, decreases in the inelastic portion. And that is what is going on in this total revenue. So firms that have market power try to set their prices in the elastic portion close to the unit elastic portion, but not at the unit elastic portion on these curves. So that's how that works. So if the elasticity coefficient is greater than 1, so E sub D is greater than 1, you have an elastic or relatively elastic demand. Quantity demanded changes by a larger percentage than price. If price increases, total revenue goes down. If price decreases, total revenue goes up. If your elasticity coefficient is equal to 1, E sub D is equal to 1, you have a unitary elastic good. Quantity demanded changes by the same percentage as price. And whether price goes up or down, total revenue does not change. If your elasticity coefficient is less than 1, E sub D is less than 1, you have an inelastic or relatively inelastic good. Quantity demanded changes by a smaller percentage than price. If price goes up, total revenue goes up. If price goes down, total revenue goes down. So price moves with total revenue. So what are the determinants of price elasticity? Substitutability and proportion of income. Substitutability, basically, this is also sometimes referred to as definition of market. More substitutes demands more elastic. So think of like breakfast. If you define something as breakfast, you either are eating breakfast or not eating breakfast. But then you could also say breakfast cereals. There's a lot of things other than breakfast cereals that you could eat as breakfast. So this makes that more breakfast cereals more elastic than breakfast. And then you could say a single breakfast cereal post raisin bran, which we'll get to in a few slides, and that will make that highly elastic. And then you could go past breakfast and say food, um, and that is much more inelastic than even just breakfast because you're either going to eat or die. Proportion of income, higher proportion of income demand is more elastic. So the more income, the more of your income it takes, the more elastic it is. Um, you may say like, if something rises a lot and recently housing has risen greatly, you may think, well, there's things I can't do with that. What are you going to do? So I used to teach at Odessa College in Midland, Texas, which is an oil town. And those students used to school me on the way the housing market worked there. And so that being an oil town, they would have booms and busts. They said when it was a boom, if it was an extended boom, you would have rents going up 2, 3, 4 times rent each year. So you would have an $800 apartment that in year two would be $2,400. And said you would see like white collar workers sleeping under bridges, and that wasn't unusual. And so, but also if it turned out to be if all of a sudden we had a bust or they had a bust, the next thing you'd know is that $2,400 apartment or $3,600 a year or month apartment, they would be they would come back and say, okay, um, new rent is $700 and we'll pay your first 8 months rent. So basically, they're going to pay 2/3 of a year's rent just to get you in there because they don't have all the oil workers left and they don't have anybody there to work. I mean, anybody there to live. So it's kind of a crazy, crazy thing. Um, Luxuries and necessities. Luxury goods are more elastic. You don't need that fur coat. You don't need that yacht. Um, but you do need those necessities like food. So that's a kind of a no-brainer on that one. Time, the more time available, the more elastic a good is. Gas, if a pipeline busts and you have a spike in gas prices short run, you're basically going to have to pay that. But if long run gas prices go up, you can make adjustments. You can buy a more fuel efficient car. You can move closer to work. You can get an e-bike. Those kinds of things. And there's all kinds of different things that you could do and make changes on that. So here are some selected price elasticity demand. This list is from your book, and I don't agree with a lot of these, so I have another list next. But newspapers at 0.1, I don't agree with that. Like, how many people are still reading newspapers? Um, Electricity for the household, 0.13, that might be right. Bread at 0.15. Major League Baseball tickets at 0.23, I don't really agree with. I'm a massive baseball fan. I study the game a good bit and operate baseball operations, etc. Most baseball season ticket holders are businesses, and fans who are not businesses are price conscious. So price conscious people are not really inelastic demand type people. So that's not really reasonable to be 0.23. Cigarettes at 0.25. That's about right with the next one too. Telephone service at 0.26. It depends on what kind of telephone service, whether it's landline, cell phone, whatever. Sugar at 0.3. That's off compared to the next one greatly. Medical care 0.31. It kind of depends on who it's for. You'll see that in the next one. You kind of got to define that a little bit better. Eggs at 0.32. Legal services at 0.37. Auto repair at 0.4. gas at 0.58, milk at 0.63, household appliances at 0.63, liquor at 0.7, I don't agree with, movies at 0.87, beer at 0.9 is greatly off, shoes at 0.91, motor vehicles at 1.14, beef at 1.27, um, China glassware, tableware 1.54, maybe. Restaurant meals at 2.27 is way, way off. Lamb and mutton 2.65, maybe. And fresh peas at 2.83. That's probably true. Um, and then this one is from a book I trust. Um, so here we go. This is an old book I used to use, and I got this. I like this when I got them from them. Books, Barnes and Noble. So think in a bookstore, you had to walk into a bookstore, buy a book. -4. So this is for highly elastic. Books from Amazon, downloaded to your Kindle, 0.6, so more inelastic. DVDs from Amazon, 3.1. Post Raisin Bran, a single brand of cereal, 2.5, so highly elastic. Automobiles 1.95. Tide liquid detergent, once again a single brand of detergent, 3.92, once again near 4. Coca-Cola 1.22, a single brand, but once again one of the world's leading brands, which we'll talk about later in a future chapter. That's once again module 3. Grapes 1.18. Restaurant meals at 0.67. Last one had it at 2 point something. We eat out way more than they gave that credit for. Health insurance, low income households at 0.65, bread at 0.4, which is way off from what they had. Water for residential use at 0.38, chicken at 0.37, cocaine at 0.28, cigarettes at 0.25, beer at 0.29, way different than 0.9. Catholic school attendance at 1.19, residential natural gas at 0.09, gas at 0.06, milk at 0.04, and sugar at 0.04. So to me, looking at this, the vice goods, actually, people would give up their vice goods before they let their kids not go to Catholic school. That's kind of interesting to me. And the idea that Coca-Cola is like the only brand name that is even close to inelastic. It's still elastic, but it's getting close to unit elastic. So those are kind of interesting to me. Applications, large crop yields. It's an inelastic demand, lower total revenue. Having lived in the Midwest for many years, Kansas and Nebraska, I can tell you this: every farmer, you have 500 acres, then the guy next to you has 500 acres, and you're both experiencing the exact same weather conditions, but you still believe that you need a bumper crop and that guy's crops need to fail for some reason. Like if the bugs are on his crops, they're on your crops too. And if he got rain, you got rain. There's no way it rained on your 500 acres and not his 500 acres. But for some reason, that's what they believe, that they need the bumper crop and he doesn't. And it's a weird mindset, but that's what they believe. It's kind of nuts. Excise taxes, and it's an inelastic demand, more total revenue, and this is for the government. They put excise taxes on certain goods, mostly vice goods and gas. So there's excise taxes on your liquor, your cigarettes, um, your beer. I think there's on all alcohol. I think it's on all the alcohol, and the gasoline and the cigarettes. Decriminalization of illegal drugs. It's an inelastic ban. It's more total revenue. More states are starting to realize this. I think we've gotten to that point. We've tipped it over. There are more states that have legalized marijuana than have not at this point. I think we're at 38 or 39 now, which means we're down to like 11 or 12 states that have not legalized marijuana. And those states are just raking in money um, from those taxes. I think Minnesota did fix their law because Minnesota actually originally passed the law and forgot to put the taxes into the law. Price elasticity of supply is going to be video 2. So we'll see you in video 2. Take care.